How you doing, folks? Welcome to another installment of Me in My Basement. Today is Monday, the 20th of April, 2020. I think the last time we spoke, I was out on my deck doing a barbecue. It's a nice enough day to barbecue today. Just back from a walk. Might barbecue, but probably not because I'm in the mood for hamburgers. We have hamburger patties, but we have no hamburger buns. So I'm devastated. But anyway, we'll do something. Today was an interesting day. I got a lot of work done, actually more work than I planned to do. I start working at 7 a.m. because that's the best time to log on to our servers and get in early so that I can have a good connection. People who try to log on later in the day, like at 8 o'clock or 8:30, they usually have more of a struggle getting into the good VPN connection. They have to go to a backup, and it's not quite as good. So it gives me a chance to get some work done early before the noise all starts. Today, the noise started and didn't really stop, so I had planned to knock off around 3 o'clock, which would actually have been about an 8-hour day instead of 7.5. As it turned out, I had a phone call to make right at 3. That went till almost 4, so I ended up working a lot longer than I intended, but that's fine. I got work done, so that's the main thing. We do important work, and the more work we do, the more people are happy with the work that we do, I presume. An interesting thing happened today. This morning, after doing a clean out of a closet on the weekend, in that closet was a lot of old pictures and framed photos and family photos, mainly from Janice's side of the family. So I'm down here working away, and Janice comes down the stairs around 10 or 10:30 with these things. These are newspapers that she found. They're both printed in Montreal. One of them is from 1926, and one of them is from 1927. And these are just fantastic resources. I've taken a tight shot of some of these and have decided I'm going to overlay this video with some of the slower motion shots of the actual newspapers themselves. But what an interesting snapshot in history to go from something that's really, it's over 90 years old. These newspaper sheets were used in the back of picture frames, I suppose, as padding to provide the proper amount of pressure on the back of the picture so it wouldn't slide around in the frame. And when Janice took the frame apart to do some scanning and some looking at these pictures, these newspapers were underneath inside. They were packaged by the Harvey Studios in Fredericton, New Brunswick, which is, interestingly, the place where Janice got her graduation photos done. I got my graduation photos done, and I'm quite sure Neil, our son, got his graduation photos done at the Harvey Studios over the course of the years. That particular photography place has been around forever, and they did some pictures of Neil's grandfather, Janice's dad, as a youth in the mid to late 1920s. And he would only be in his single-digit years, 8 or 9 years old, I would think, at the time. And there's some pictures of him, sitting in a chair wearing these shorts and long socks and all of that. And we also found some pictures of his father back in 1909, I think it was, when he was at the Fredericton Business College, both as a member of the student body and also on the basketball team. So we saw some pretty cool stuff just in the pictures themselves, and then made this discovery that Janice did of the newspaper clippings in behind. In that clipping, there is a news story and a picture of the Stanley Cup. And the Stanley Cup is only like that high, and it hasn't had all that bottom piece added to it. And it talks about the teams that will be playing in the playoffs in the next couple of weeks, looking to win the Stanley Cup. And that was the 1927 paper. And there's ads in there for things. Women's hats for Easter was one of the ads. There were ads for journeys you could take on ships, cruise ships back then. And one of the interesting articles I thought was pretty cool was Winston Churchill giving his opinion on World War I. Now, this was at a time when, and many of us who know World War II history realize the important role that Winston Churchill played in the war. And he was Prime Minister of Great Britain, basically, from about 1940 until 1945 or 46. As soon as the war ended, actually, there was an election, and they decided to get rid of him for a while. But he came back, and he was Prime Minister in the 1950s as well. And he lived till, I think it was 1965. So he's like 90 or so years old when he finally died. But this guy was amazing. He was born during the reign of Queen Victoria. He served in South Africa during the Boer War. He was First Lord of the Admiralty in World War I. He was a member of Parliament for, I think, 2 or 3 different parties. He switched back and forth all the time. And eventually, through all kinds of machinations and coups and things, he eventually becomes Prime Minister, succeeding Neville Chamberlain, I think in early 1940 or maybe very late 1939. Anyway, this is a newspaper article from 1927, before he gained the kind of fame that we know him for the World War II exploits, working in the bunker with the cabinet in the war room, trying to run the war against Hitler, basically, from London. He's a tremendous figure. And to see him in this newspaper article in 1927, almost 20 years before he attained the reputation that we know him for mostly now, which is World War II, he obviously already had a very distinguished reputation as a historian, as a political figure, as a military figure, and as a thinker. Quite a guy. But that was printed in this Montreal newspaper basically in real time as he was offering his views between the 2 wars that were so critical in his legacy. So that was really cool. There's lots of other neat things in those newspapers that we've really enjoyed reading in the last few hours. I guess on the topic of the day, there are a couple of topics going on right now, actually. First off, with the regular one, PEI reported no new cases once again today, so there's been several days now of no new cases. We're still standing at 26 altogether. 23 of them have recovered fully. That means there are only 3 active cases we're pursuing here on the island, which is wonderful. The lockdown is working. The social distancing is working. There's increased restrictions on the bridge and on the ferry terminal in Surrey, as well as at the airport. On Friday, or actually late on Thursday last week, the government announced that it was invoking a state of emergency for the whole province, not just the health area, but for the whole province. And that was to give our chief medical officer more power in civil society to post officers and to make use of peace officers to help control the borders here of the island. So that was done. The state of emergency took effect at 8 o'clock on Friday morning, and things have been working fairly well. In our walk today, we did our social distancing from everybody else. People seem to still be in a good mood. So things are going well on the COVID-19 front, and I'll just leave that at that. The biggest news, of course, from the weekend was the rampage and murders that took place in Nova Scotia, where 1 RCMP officer and perhaps as many as 20 other people, the last number I saw was 18 or 19, with more possible. This guy flipped out on Saturday night and went on a rampage. You've probably seen all about it in the news. It's not far from here, actually. It's just across the water into northern Nova Scotia, and from that area down towards Halifax is where most of this all took place. I'm very familiar with the area. The gas station where they finally did the takedown, I've been at that gas station a few times. It's a popular spot on the way from the airport back here to PEI for people that are flying back or coming back from shopping trips in Halifax. It's one of those Irving big stops. It's a huge place like Dysart's in Bangor or some of these other massive truck stops. Anyway, that's where it all went down as far as the end of him, thank goodness, on Sunday morning around 11:30. This hits me a little bit because my brother's a member of the RCMP, and he's stationed in Manitoba, and he faces danger on a daily basis, and I worry about him all the time. And here we are once again with members of our police being targeted and put into danger, and in one case losing their life because of senseless idiot thoughts and prayers and all that, like everybody else, although they don't do any good right now. It's too late for one officer in Nova Scotia at least. Another was wounded, but apparently those injuries are not life-threatening. But there are over a dozen other individuals, civilians, innocent people that were killed by this guy. And we're all wrestling with that. It's really close to home. This is Atlantic Canada, where this thing is not supposed to happen. But now we've had 6 RCMP officers, or city police officers, killed in the line of duty by being murdered, as opposed to we've had other deaths in the line of duty. In one case, there was a Mountie helping a man change a tire on the road, and someone who was a tourist actually driving a van. They were from, I think, Connecticut. They drove by and sideswiped the car, probably just inattentive driving, and the Mountie was killed on the side of the road while helping someone change a tire. So police officers are out there at risk all the time, and I feel really badly for the family of the young lady who was killed yesterday by this idiot. And all we can do is hope that it never happens again, but for some reason it always seems to, not unlike some of the shootings we've seen in the United States and some places in Europe as well, where terrorism and other things drive people to do things that people just shouldn't ever do. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. It was nice this morning to see a beautiful sunrise. I took a picture of it, posted it on Instagram. It's a new day was dawning, and all we can do is pick up, keep on moving, and hold each other close, not too close, 6 feet apart, and try to get through the days and the weeks to come. It looks like maybe in some places we're starting to turn some corners and get our lives back maybe soon. I'm very, very fortunate. I can't imagine how I would be doing right now if I worked in a job that ended or was even suspended because of this whole lockdown situation. I'm so lucky to be working in a place where I can bring all of my equipment home, work from here, still put out all the same amount of work that I was doing at the office, still get paid, still produce my products that I have for my customers out there in my government department. And I'm so lucky compared to so many other people. So I never forget that. And if you're lucky, take time to remember those who aren't. And if you're not lucky, hang in there. This will all be gone at some point. It has to be. It just can't go on forever. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have yourselves a wonderful evening and a great couple of days this week. Take care.